To discuss this in the studio is Mona Bayoumi, who's a lawyer who's also Muslim and who's in favour of Sharia tribunals. And in our Westminster studio, Maryam Namazi, who's from the organisation One Law, which is opposed to Sharia courts. Thank you both for joining me tonight. First of all, why is it a good idea, in your view, Mona, to have a Sharia court or Sharia tribunal in Cardiff?
Well, first of all, it's not sort of a court tribunal in the ordinary sense of the word.
What's the difference then?
Well, the difference is that effectively the system they're going to have in place is a system that the UK has recognised for quite a number of years. It is just another form of alternative dispute resolution. It's entirely voluntary. Both parties will sign an arbitration agreement beforehand. They are entitled, under the current rules, to withdraw from the arbitration at any point prior to a determination being made. Any suggestion, the way I see it, any suggestion that this would be a coercive measure against women, I just don't see that, to be honest.
Maryam Namazi, that sounds perfectly sensible and decent.
Well, I don't think so. I think there's a religious compulsion, and particularly with the Muslim Arbitration Act's a legal compulsion. And I think the problem is that Sharia law is discriminatory against women. I don't think it's fully voluntary. I think a lot of people are pressured into going to these courts, and particularly given the fact that it is discriminatory. I mean, if you look at Sharia law, a woman's testimony is worth half that of a man's. Women don't have unilateral right to divorce, whereas men do, which is why women go to these courts and not men. Girls, for example, get half the inheritance that boys do, and so on and so forth. So in a sense, I think what we're doing is marginalizing and relegating large numbers of our citizens to sham courts, and one with lesser rights and unequal rights and unfair and discriminatory rights.
All right, let's put some of those points then to Mona. First of all, the women's rights issue. Women's testimony is worth less than that of a man.
Well, it's not quite like that. The way it's described in the Quran and in the Prophet's teachings is that a woman's testimony is equal to that of two men, only in the sense that if you are going to rely on a woman's testimony, the way that women are inherently can be, that they are more emotional, that they can think more of an emotional perspective.
Forgive me, that sounds discriminatory.
Well, it depends on how you decide to see it. At the end of the day, insofar whether or not it's discriminatory isn't necessarily the point. The point is, it is entirely voluntary whether a woman chooses to apply for arbitration or not. Okay. Community pressure is a different issue.
Let's put that specific point then to you, Maryam, because you think that there is compulsion, there is coercion.
I mean, I think first off, this is what happens when you bring religion into the law. You have, people reciting the Quran and the Hadith. It's as if you're discussing, divorce and child custody and making reference to the Bible. We live in the 21st century. We have laws that have been fought for by progressive social movements, and they belong to everybody. But on the issue of
on the compulsion issue,
let me say it this way. I mean, I think the fact of the matter is that if you look at, in Canada, when they wanted to bring the Sharia courts, the person who was advocating them said, look, it's voluntary, but if as a Muslim you don't go to these courts, you're actually, doing something that's the same as being an apostate, which is worse than not going to these courts. So in a sense, you can see that if you don't adhere to these rules, religious law could mean that you're a heretic, you're an apostate, and worse.
Let's put that point to Mona Bayoumi. Then people that don't take part would be stigmatised, ostracised.
Well, I don't agree with that. I'm a member of the Muslim community myself. There may well be certain aspects, certain sectors of the community that may think that, but equally, no doubt, those same sectors, without the Muslim arbitration tribunal, would also ostracise a woman if she chose to complain against her husband for domestic violence, for example. Those are cultural issues that need to be addressed by other means.
Maryam Namazi, this is not really anything different to what is going on in Jewish law and talking about the kind of arbitration like ACAS and related. It's a sort of para-legal system that is going on already.
Well, it might be already going on. Yes, there are Jewish precedents, but the point is that you know, people's rights and equality is not for courts and not for religious law, but for real life human beings. And I think that if we want to protect people, if we want to protect their rights, irrespective of whether they are Muslim, Jewish or atheist, we need to have one secular law for all. And I think it's important to push that point.
Fine.
I think what we do with this, by bringing in religious courts, we actually fragment society and we give large segments of the population different standards of rights, which is just not fair.
Different standards of rights?
Again, I don't agree with that. Like I said, arbitration has been around for a very long time. Both parties sign an agreement. They are represented by lawyers if they choose to.
Not necessarily on religious grounds, are they?
Well,
that's the difficulty.
What do you mean by on religious grounds?
When you're talking about arbitration like ACAS, that's the...
Well, no, we haven't had that. But the Beth Din courts have been around for quite some time. There's never been a suggestion there that that's creating a different tier of tribunals. This is basically the same thing.
A final question to you, Mona, which is, as a Muslim, one of the criticisms of using Sharia law, using Sharia tribunals, is that it encourages or fosters that sense of separatism, and that it actually drives a wedge between the Muslim community and the indigenous community.
Well, this is the problem that we've always had when we're trying to have a debate about integration and whether this is a secular society or not.
Too big a question for us.
Far too big a question. I don't think it acts as a bar to integration. In the same way as the Jewish community hasn't been barred from integration.
Time's beaten us. Mona Bayoumi, Maryam Namazi, thank you both very much for joining me this evening.